Freeze the budget. The entire $120 million. Do it now!
Get off the phone this instant, sir. You are causing a scene. This is completely unacceptable behavior.
Sir, we need this seat for another passenger. Claire Bennett said it loud enough for the first-class cabin to hear. Not too loud. Not rude enough to be called rude, but sharp enough to make every conversation stop. Ethan Brooks looked up from his tablet. For a moment, he did not move. His boarding pass rested on the armrest beside him. Seat 2A, first class, confirmed, paid, booked weeks earlier. Claire stood over him in her Navy North Star Airlines uniform, one hand resting on the headrest in front of him, the other gripping a small tablet against her hip. Her smile was thin. Her eyes were colder than the cabin air. Behind her, an older white man in a grey suit waited near the galley, tapping 2 fingers against his leather briefcase. Richard Hayes. 61. Expensive watch. Red face, the kind of man who looked insulted by the idea of waiting. Ethan glanced past Claire, then back at her. "I'm sorry," he said, calm and low. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Claire's smile tightened. "There's been a seating adjustment." The words moved through the cabin like a draft. A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine. A man in row 3 paused with his champagne halfway to his mouth. Someone behind Ethan whispered, "What's going on?" Ethan reached for his boarding pass and held it up. "My seat is 2A." Claire looked at it, but only for a second. Not long enough to read. Long enough to pretend. "I understand what it says, sir." "Sir." The word should have carried respect. It did not. Ethan felt the old pressure in his chest. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. He had felt it in hotel lobbies, in private clubs, in boardrooms where people first looked for the real decision-maker behind him. He had felt it every time someone saw his skin before they saw his work, but he did not let that feeling reach his face. He straightened his tie. Dark blue. Simple. Custom-made, but not flashy. "I booked this seat weeks ago," he said. "I need to work during the flight." Claire inhaled through her nose. Her patience was already thinning, and the plane had not even left the gate. "I'm trying to make this easy for everyone." Ethan looked around the cabin. Easy for everyone. That was the kind of sentence people used when only one person was being asked to disappear. Richard Hayes stepped closer. "Claire," he said, not bothering to lower his voice, "I have a meeting after landing." "I always sit there." Ethan turned his head slowly. Richard looked at him for the first time. Not fully. Not as a man. More like an inconvenience in a tailored suit. Claire gave Richard a small, apologetic nod. "We're handling it, Mr. Hayes." That was the moment Ethan understood. This was not a mistake. This was a decision. A decision made quietly in the galley. A decision wrapped in airline language. A decision old enough to have worn many uniforms. Ethan's phone buzzed on the tray table. The screen lit up. Initial transfer cleared. $25 million. For one breath, the entire cabin seemed to fade behind the glow of that notification. North Star Airlines had just received the first installment from Summit Ridge Capital. Ethan's company. His signature. His money. The same airline now asking him to move to economy so Richard Hayes could feel important in a window seat. Claire did not see the message. Richard did not see it. No one in that cabin knew that the quiet black man in seat 2A was not just another passenger. He was the man North Star's board had been waiting for. Ethan placed one finger on the phone screen. He did not press anything yet. Not out of hesitation. Out of discipline. Because men like Ethan did not survive by reacting first. They survived by seeing the whole board before making a move. Claire leaned closer. "Sir, I'm going to need your cooperation." Her voice carried farther this time. A few passengers shifted. Someone lifted a phone. The tiny sound of recording began. A soft click, then another. Ethan heard it. Claire heard it too, and still she continued. We can reseat you in economy and provide a travel voucher. Ethan looked at her. Then at Richard. Then at the boarding pass in his hand. His mother's voice rose in his memory, gentle but firm, from a kitchen in Detroit where the heat barely worked, and bills sat stacked beside the salt shaker. Don't let anyone make you smaller just because they need to feel tall. Ethan breathed in, slowly. He had built Summit Ridge from borrowed office space and empty promises. He had sat across from bankers who smiled while denying him loans. He had watched weaker men get welcomed into rooms he had to earn twice. And now here he was, first class, seat 2A, still being asked to prove he belonged. He looked back at Claire. I will not move, he said. The cabin froze. Claire's face changed. Not much. Just enough. Her smile vanished. Richard scoffed behind her. Oh, for God's sake. Ethan lowered his voice, but every word landed clean. This is my seat. I paid for it. I have a confirmed boarding pass. If you want me removed, you'll need to say clearly why. Claire swallowed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then she looked toward the galley. Toward someone Ethan had not noticed before. A tall man in a charcoal executive suit stood half hidden near the curtain. Silver hair, hard jaw, watching everything. Nathan Caldwell, North Star's Vice President of Operations. Ethan recognized him from the investment files. Nathan gave Claire the smallest nod. That nod told Ethan everything. This was bigger than a seat. Bigger than one flight attendant. Bigger than Richard Hayes and his wounded pride. This was power protecting itself. Claire turned back. Then I'll have to call security. Ethan's finger moved across his phone. Not fast, not dramatic. Just once. Transaction frozen. Then he set the phone face down. His voice stayed calm. Do what you think you need to do. And in the silence that followed, Ethan Brooks sat perfectly still, while the airline around him began making the most expensive mistake in its history. Claire Bennett held his gaze for 1 second longer than she needed to. Then she turned away. Her shoes struck the cabin floor in quick, clipped beats as she walked toward the galley. Each step sounded small, but in the silence of first class, it felt like a countdown. Ethan watched her go. He did not look at the passengers recording him. He did not look at Richard Hayes, who had already begun loosening his shoulders, as if victory was only a formality. Ethan kept his eyes on the curtain near the front of the cabin. Nathan Caldwell stood there. Still, expressionless, but his jaw was tight. Nathan had spent more than 3 decades inside North Star Airlines. He knew every union rule, every internal weakness, every board member who owed him a favor. He had survived scandals, layoffs, fuel crises, and leadership changes. He had learned how to make power look like procedure. And now, for the first time that morning, he was nervous. Not because he knew who Ethan was, because Ethan did not behave like a man who could be easily scared. Claire picked up the crew phone near the galley. Her voice dropped, but not enough. We need assistance in first class, she said. Passenger refusing crew instructions. A woman in seat 3B frowned. Her name was Margaret Ellis, 72, a retired school principal from Ohio. She had seen enough unfairness in classrooms to recognize it in adult clothing. She leaned toward her husband and whispered. He hasn't raised his voice once. Her husband, Paul, kept his eyes forward. I know. But he said nothing louder than that. That silence bothered him immediately. A younger man in row 4 lifted his phone higher. His thumb trembled slightly as he recorded. He was not brave by nature. He worked in insurance. He avoided conflict. but something about Ethan's stillness made him feel ashamed to look away. Richard Hayes stepped into the aisle, impatient now. "Can we move this along?" he said. "Some of us have schedules." Ethan looked up at him. "That is true," Ethan said. "Some of us do." Richard blinked, thrown by the calmness. Claire returned with a man in a dark blazer and an earpiece. Airport security. Behind him came a second officer, younger, broader, his hands resting near his belt. The first officer stopped beside Ethan's row. "Sir, I'm Officer Nolan Price with Airport Security. The crew says you're refusing to comply with a seating reassignment." Ethan held out his boarding pass. "I am refusing to give up a seat I paid for." Officer Price took the pass. He looked at it, then at Ethan, then back at the pass. "Seat 2A, first class." The officer's face shifted just slightly. He had expected a different kind of problem. Behind him, Claire spoke quickly. "He's been difficult since boarding. We have a VIP passenger who needs accommodation, and he's creating a delay." Ethan turned his head toward her. "Difficult how?" Claire opened her mouth. Nothing came out at first. The cabin waited. The air seemed to tighten. Ethan continued, still seated, still composed. "Did I shout?" Claire's lips pressed together. "No, but did I threaten anyone?" "No, but you refused. Did I show a valid boarding pass?" Officer Price still held the pass in his hand. He looked uncomfortable now. Claire's cheeks colored. Nathan stepped forward. "That is enough," he said. His voice carried the confidence of someone used to ending conversations. Officer Price turned. "And you are?" "Nathan Caldwell, Senior Operations Executive for North Star." The title landed in the cabin like a badge. Claire straightened. Richard smiled faintly. Ethan did neither. Nathan moved closer, smoothing his jacket with one hand. "Mr. Brooks, we do not want this to become unpleasant." Ethan watched him carefully. Nathan knew his name. Of course he did. He had known it before Claire ever approached. That told Ethan this was not confusion. It was intent. Nathan lowered his voice, but the phones caught every word. "We are offering you a reasonable alternative. Economy seating, a voucher, and our appreciation." Ethan gave a small nod, almost as if listening to an investment pitch. "And if I decline?" Nathan's eyes hardened. "Then the crew may determine you are interfering with aircraft operations. That can have legal consequences." There it was. The threat. Clean. Polished. Federal language wrapped around personal bias. Ethan felt anger rise in him, cold and precise. Not the kind that burns, the kind that sharpens. He thought of his mother again. Marilyn Brooks, standing in a grocery store line with coupons in her hand, while a cashier rolled her eyes. He remembered being 12, watching his mother smile through humiliation because she needed the groceries more than she needed pride. He had promised himself then that one day he would have enough power to never beg for dignity. But age had taught him something harder. Power did not protect you from disrespect. It only gave you a choice in how to answer it. Ethan looked at Officer Price. "Am I being removed because I am a safety threat?" Officer Price hesitated. Claire looked at Nathan. Richard muttered, "This is ridiculous." Margaret Ellis finally spoke. "No," she said. Everyone turned. Her voice was not loud, but it was steady. "He is not a threat. He has been polite the entire time." Claire's eyes flashed. "Ma'am, please stay out of crew matters." Margaret sat taller. "I spent 40 years in public schools. I know what unfair treatment sounds like when it's dressed up as policy." A ripple moved through the cabin. Small, but real. The young man in row 4 whispered into his recording. "You all heard that, right?" Nathan's face tightened. Officer Price handed the boarding pass back to Ethan. "Sir," he said quietly, "the airline can still ask you to step off, so this can be resolved at the gate." Ethan took the pass. I understand. Claire exhaled, relieved too soon. Ethan stood slowly. The cabin watched. He buttoned his suit jacket, picked up his briefcase, lifted his tablet from the seat. Then he turned to Nathan. I will step off under protest. I want your full name, title, and the stated reason for removing me from my paid seat. Nathan's expression flickered. Ethan continued. And I want it documented before this aircraft departs. Richard laughed under his breath. Good luck with that. Ethan looked at him once. Just once. And Richard stopped smiling, because there was something in Ethan's eyes now that had not been there before. Not anger, not fear, recognition. The kind a man gets when he stops hoping people will do the right thing and starts preparing to make them answer for not doing it. The jet bridge felt colder than the cabin. Ethan walked between the two security officers with his briefcase in one hand and his boarding pass in the other. He did not rush. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him stumble, shrink, or plead. Behind him, the aircraft door stayed open. Voices spilled out from first class. Claire Bennett spoke in a low, urgent tone. Nathan Caldwell answered even lower. Richard Hayes laughed once, short and pleased, like a man settling a bill someone else had paid. Then came Margaret Ellis's voice. This is shameful. No one answered her, but the words followed Ethan down the jet bridge like a hand on his shoulder. At the gate, passengers waiting for later flights turned to stare. Some had already seen the live videos. Others simply saw a black man, escorted from a first-class cabin, and filled in the blanks the way people often do when authority is nearby. A little boy holding a plastic dinosaur looked up at his grandmother. Did he do something bad? The grandmother pulled him closer. I don't know, she said. Ethan heard it. That answer hurt more than it should have. I don't know. That was the wound of these moments, not the insult itself, not even the removal. It was the cloud left behind, the suspicion, the quiet permission for strangers to wonder if maybe he deserved it. Officer Nolan Price guided Ethan to a quiet corner near the gate desk. Mr. Brooks, he said, his voice lower now. I'm going to be honest. Your boarding pass looked valid. Ethan turned to him. Then why am I standing here? Officer Price looked toward the aircraft. His jaw moved once. Airline crew has authority before departure. If they say a passenger is interfering, we're expected to respond. Even when the passenger is sitting quietly. Price did not answer. That silence was an answer. The younger officer shifted his weight. He looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. His name badge read Mason. He glanced at Ethan, then away. Sir, Mason said softly, for what it's worth, you handled yourself better than most people would have. Ethan gave him a tired look. That bar is too low. Mason swallowed. At the gate desk, a North Star supervisor named Denise Harper approached with a tablet pressed to her chest. She was in her early 50s, with silver glasses and the tight expression of someone trying to stop a small problem from becoming paperwork. Mr. Brooks, she said, we can place you on a later flight. Ethan looked at her. I don't need a later flight. I need the reason I was removed from the seat I paid for. Denise blinked. I understand you're upset. No, Ethan said. The word was quiet, but it stopped her. I'm not upset. I'm documenting. Denise's face changed. That word had weight. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened a voice memo. Please state your name, title, and the official reason North Star removed me from seat 2A. Denise looked at Officer Price, then toward the aircraft. I'm not comfortable being recorded. Ethan nodded. That is your choice. But this conversation is taking place in a public airport gate area, and I am preserving my account of what happened. Denise's lips pressed flat. Behind the gate windows, baggage carts moved under the wing. The plane sat bright and polished in the morning sun, as if nothing ugly had happened inside it. Then Ethan's phone buzzed again. Maya Robinson, his chief operating officer. He answered. Her voice came through sharp, controlled, and worried. Ethan, tell me you're all right. I'm fine. You're not on the plane. No. A pause. Then her tone dropped. What did they do? Ethan looked at Denise Harper, at the security officers, at the aircraft door where Claire stood, watching from the threshold. They removed me from my paid first-class seat to give it to Richard Hayes. Maya inhaled. The Richard Hayes connected to Nathan Caldwell? Yes. Another pause. Shorter this time. More dangerous. Do they know who you are? Ethan's eyes stayed on Claire. No. Maya was silent for half a breath. Then paper rustled on her end. The transfer? Frozen. Good. Denise's eyes widened. Officer Price looked up. Claire, still near the aircraft door, could not hear the whole call. But she could see faces changing. That was enough to make her uneasy. Maya continued. The board packet is ready. Legal is standing by. James wants every name, every recording, every witness. I have some of it. We'll get the rest. Ethan looked through the glass at Richard Hayes settling into seat 2A. Claire leaned down to offer him a drink. A real glass this time. Clear. Full. Respectfully served. Something in Ethan's chest went still, not numb. Still. There was a difference. He watched Richard lift the glass and smile. Then Ethan said into the phone, "Tell James to prepare a notice of material concern and contact William Parker's office." Maya's voice sharpened. "You want North Star's CEO notified now?" "Yes." "Before the meeting?" Ethan's gaze moved to Nathan Caldwell, now standing inside the aircraft doorway, watching him with narrowed eyes, especially before the meeting. Denise stepped closer. "Mr. Brooks, if this is about compensation, we can offer travel credit and miles." Ethan lowered the phone. For the first time, something close to sadness crossed his face. "Ms. Harper, this is the problem. You think dignity can be paid back in points?" Denise looked down. No one spoke. The overhead speaker announced boarding for another flight. Wheels rolled across tile. Coffee machines hissed nearby. Life kept moving around the small circle of silence they had created. Ethan lifted the phone again. "Maya, I'm here. Send the first message." What should it say? Ethan looked once more at seat 2A, then at the people who had decided he did not belong there. "Tell them Summit Ridge Capital is suspending all further funding, pending review of North Star's conduct, internal leadership, and exposure to civil liability." Maya did not hesitate. Done. Inside the aircraft, Nathan Caldwell's phone lit up. Then Claire's tablet chimed. Then Denise Harper's radio cracked. One by one, the people who had treated Ethan like an inconvenience began to understand that the man standing at the gate was not the problem they had removed. He was the power they had offended. Nathan Caldwell looked down at his phone. For the first time that morning, the color left his face. The message was short. Summit Ridge Capital has suspended all further funding, pending review of North Star Airlines' leadership conduct and potential civil liability. Nathan read it once. Then again. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned pale. Claire Bennett stood beside him, near the aircraft door, still holding her service tablet. She had seen executives angry before. She had seen pilots lose patience, passengers threaten lawsuits, supervisors panic over delays. But she had never seen Nathan Caldwell look afraid. "What is it?" she whispered. Nathan did not answer. Inside the first-class cabin, Richard Hayes had already settled into seat 2A. His shoes were stretched out. His drink sat on the side console. He had the relaxed smile of a man who believed the world had corrected itself in his favor. He raised the glass slightly toward Nathan. Finally, he said, "Can we go now?" Nathan did not smile back. His phone rang. William Parker, Chief Executive Officer of North Star Airlines. Nathan's throat worked once before he answered. "William." The voice on the other end was not loud. That made it worse. "Tell me why I just received an emergency notice from Summit Ridge." Nathan turned away from the cabin. There was a passenger issue, minor. Crew handled it. A passenger issue involving Ethan Brooks? The name cut through Nathan like a blade. Claire heard it. Her fingers went loose around the tablet. "What?" she whispered. Nathan ignored her. "We are still confirming the passenger identity." "No," William said. "You are done confirming. I am looking at the investment file. Ethan Brooks, Summit Ridge Capital, 44. Seat 2A on Flight 1876. The same seat your crew just removed him from?" Nathan's breathing became shallow. In seat 2A, Richard noticed the change. His smile faded. The cabin, which had been settling back into comfort, began to shift again. People sensed something had turned. They did not know what yet, but they felt it. Claire stepped backward. Her eyes moved toward the gate, where Ethan stood behind the glass, phone in hand, still calm. Too calm. William's voice tightened. "Nathan, I need you to listen carefully. That man is the reason this company is not announcing emergency layoffs next month. He controls $120 million. We need to keep this deal alive. What exactly did you do?" Nathan closed his eyes, only for a second. But Ethan, watching from the gate, saw it. That small break in control. That was the first crack. Nathan lowered his voice. There was a request to accommodate a long-standing VIP. William went silent. Then he said, "You removed our largest prospective investor from first class for Richard Hayes." The name Richard Hayes carried disgust now. Not friendship, not loyalty. Disgust. Nathan glanced at Richard. Richard sat straighter. "What's going on?" Richard demanded. Claire moved toward him, forcing a smile that had no strength left. "Mr. Hayes, please remain seated." But her voice trembled. Margaret Ellis saw it. The retired school principal folded her hands in her lap and looked at Claire with the kind of disappointment that was worse than anger. "You knew," Margaret said quietly. Claire looked at her. "Mum, please." "No," Margaret said. "Don't please me now. You knew he had a ticket." Claire's mouth opened. No defense came. Paul Ellis, who had stayed quiet too long, finally leaned forward. "My wife is right," he said. "You treated that man like he was trouble before he ever became a problem." The young man in row 4 kept recording. His voice shook as he whispered, "They just found out who he is." Claire heard that too. Her face went hot. At the gate, Denise Harper's radio cracked again. "Denise, operations wants Mr. Brooks held at the gate. Do not let him leave. Executive response team is calling." Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. "Held?" he asked. Denise winced. "That is not what they mean. It is what they said." Officer Price stepped in gently. "Mr. Brooks is free to leave. He is not detained." Denise nodded quickly. "Of course. Of course." Ethan looked at her, and in his eyes there was no triumph. That made her feel worse. He did not look like a man enjoying revenge. He looked like a man tired of having to prove pain before people would call it wrong. His phone buzzed again. "James Miller, General Counsel for Summit Ridge." Ethan answered. "James, I have 3 passenger videos already," James said. "One shows the ticket. One shows the threat of security. One captures Caldwell near the galley, before Claire approached you." Ethan looked at Nathan through the glass. "Good. There is more," James said. "Meyer found prior complaints against North Star. Similar language, similar pattern, premium cabin removals, passenger reassignment, Vague safety explanations. Ethan's jaw tightened. How many? Enough to make this bigger than today. Ethan closed his eyes for half a breath. That was the part he had feared. Not that it happened to him, that it had happened before, to people without lawyers, without money, without anyone answering their call. He opened his eyes. Preserve everything. Already doing it. Inside the aircraft, Nathan ended the call with William Parker and turned toward Claire. His voice came out low. Get him back on the plane. Claire stared. What? Now. Claire looked toward seat 2A. Richard Hayes was still sitting there. Nathan's face hardened. Move, Richard. Richard heard his name and stood halfway. Excuse me. Nathan walked into the cabin. Richard, there has been a change. Richard's face darkened. You gave me this seat, and now I need you to return to your assigned seat. The silence that followed was sharp. Richard laughed once, disbelieving. You cannot be serious. Nathan leaned closer. For once in your life, Richard, read the room. That line landed hard. Phones lifted higher. Claire walked back toward the jet bridge, each step slower than before. When she reached the gate, she stopped several feet from Ethan. Her voice was small now. Mr. Brooks, we can reseat you in first class. Ethan looked at her, not cruelly, carefully. No, he said. Claire blinked. We can restore your seat. Ethan glanced past her, through the glass, at the cabin that had watched him be humiliated. You cannot restore what happened. Claire's eyes dropped. Ethan continued, his voice quiet enough that everyone leaned in. A seat is easy to give back. Dignity is not. No one spoke. Not Claire, not Denise, not the officers. Ethan turned toward the windows, where North Star Flight 1876 sat waiting under the morning light. Then his phone buzzed again. William Parker's office. This time, Ethan answered on speaker. Mr. Brooks, this is William Parker. The voice coming through Ethan's phone was controlled, but every person standing near the gate could hear the strain beneath it. Ethan held the phone flat in his palm. I'm listening. On the other side of the glass, Claire Bennett stood frozen at the aircraft door. Nathan Caldwell remained in the aisle, facing Richard Hayes, who was still refusing to leave seat 2. First class had become a stage, and everyone knew the curtain had already risen. William cleared his throat. First, I want to apologize for what happened this morning. Ethan looked at Denise Harper. Her eyes dropped to the floor. With respect, Mr. Parker, you do not yet know what happened. A silence followed. William understood the warning inside the sentence. Then tell me. Ethan turned slightly away from the crowd, but he did not lower his voice. I boarded with a valid paid ticket for seat 2A. Your flight attendant questioned my right to sit there. Your operations executive directed the crew to move me. Your staff threatened to classify my refusal as interference with aircraft operations. Security was called. I was removed under pressure to accommodate Richard Hayes. William breathed out slowly. Behind the glass, Nathan's phone buzzed again and again. He ignored it now. Ethan continued. No one asked Richard Hayes to prove he belonged there. No one held his boarding pass up like evidence. No one treated him like a problem waiting to happen. Officer Price looked down. He had seen it all. He had also participated in it. That realization sat heavy on his face. William spoke carefully. Mr. Brooks, I understand why you are concerned. Ethan's eyes sharpened. No. You understand the financial risk. I am asking whether you understand the human one. That sentence landed harder than anger would have. At the gate, the small crowd had grown. A few passengers from nearby seats watched without pretending otherwise. Some had their phones lowered now, not because the moment was less important, but because it had become too serious to treat like entertainment. Ethan's voice slowed. There are people who go through this and never get a call from a chief executive. They do not have a general counsel waiting. They do not control a funding agreement. They simply lose the seat, lose the dignity, swallow the insult, and are told to be grateful they were allowed to travel at all. William said nothing. For once, there was no corporate phrase ready. Inside the aircraft, Richard Hayes stood fully now, red-faced and furious. "This is insane," he snapped. "I did nothing wrong. I was told the seat was available." Margaret Ellis looked at him from across the aisle. "You knew it wasn't yours." Richard turned. "Excuse me?" Margaret's voice did not shake. "You knew. You just thought wanting it was enough." Several passengers murmured. Richard looked around, suddenly aware that the cabin had changed sides without asking his permission. Nathan stepped closer. "Richard, sit in your assigned seat." Richard pointed at Ethan through the glass. "You are embarrassing the company over him?" Nathan's eyes flickered. That word. Him. It was small, ugly, familiar. Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. In the gate area, Ethan heard the faint echo of Richard's voice through the open aircraft door. His face did not change, but his grip on the phone tightened. William heard it too. "What was that?" William asked. Ethan answered evenly. "That was your valued customer describing the man saving your company as him." Another silence. Then William's voice lost some of its polish. "I am coming to the airport." "No," Ethan said. Denise looked up quickly. William stopped. "No?" "No, I will not turn this into a hallway apology. The meeting stays at 2:00 at your headquarters. Your board should be present. Your legal counsel should be present. Mr. Caldwell should be present. Ms. Bennett should be preserved as a witness, not coached as a scapegoat." Claire flinched at her name. Denise whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan looked at her. Not harshly, just enough to remind her the moment was real. William's voice lowered. "What are you asking for before the meeting? Preserve all video, crew communications, gate logs, seat assignment records. Internal messages. Do not delete, edit, or instruct anyone to revise statements." William answered too fast. "Of course." Ethan heard the fear now. "Put it in writing." "I will. Within 10 minutes. Yes." Richard's voice rose again inside the aircraft. "I am not moving to coach because this man made a scene." Paul Ellis stood this time. Slowly. He was 74, with stiff knees and a careful way of moving. But when he spoke, his voice carried. "He did not make a scene. You did." The cabin went still. Paul looked at Richard, then at Nathan, then at Claire. "My wife and I have flown for 50 years. We have seen delays. We have seen rude passengers. We have seen mistakes. This was not a mistake." Margaret reached for his hand. Paul continued. "You took a quiet man with a valid ticket and tried to make him look dangerous, because that made it easier to take what belonged to him." No one clapped. It was not that kind of moment. But phones captured every word. Claire's eyes filled with tears, not enough to redeem her. Not yet, but enough to show that shame had finally found a place to land. At the gate, Officer Price stepped toward Ethan. "Mr. Brooks," he said quietly. "I need to say something." Ethan turned. Price swallowed. "I should have questioned it harder before asking you to step off." The younger officer, Mason, looked at him, surprised. Price kept going. "I saw the ticket. I knew it looked valid. I still followed the path of least resistance." Ethan studied him. There was no applause for doing late what should have been done early. But there was value in honesty, even delayed. "That is how systems survive," Ethan said. "Not because everyone is cruel, because too many decent people choose easy." Price nodded once. The words hit him like a sentence he would remember for years. Ethan's phone buzzed, An email appeared from William Parker. Litigation hold notice issued. Funding review acknowledged. Board notified. Ethan read it. Then he looked through the glass one final time. Richard Hayes was being escorted back toward the rear of the plane. Furious and humiliated, Nathan stood rigid in the aisle. Claire wiped at her cheek with the back of her hand. Margaret and Paul sat together, silent but steady. The aircraft still had its engines quiet. The flight had not moved, but everything else had. Ethan picked up his briefcase. Denise stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, where are you going?" "To North Star headquarters. But your meeting is hours away." Ethan looked toward the waiting plane. "No," he said. "It started the moment they asked me to move." Ethan left the gate with every eye following him. The airport around him kept moving. Rolling suitcases clicked over tile. Announcements echoed from the ceiling. A coffee machine hissed behind a crowded counter. Life continued in that strange airport way, where one person's worst morning could happen inches from someone buying a muffin. But Ethan felt none of the noise as ordinary now. Every sound was sharper. Every glance carried weight. He walked toward the exit with Officer Price a few steps behind him, and Denise Harper trailing near the rear, still clutching her tablet like it might protect her from the truth. Mason stayed back at the gate, but his eyes followed Ethan until he disappeared into the main concourse. Maya Robinson called again before Ethan reached the escalator. "I have a car waiting at arrivals," she said. "Black Lincoln. Driver's name is Aaron. Good. James is already on his way to North Star headquarters. He wants you to say as little as possible until he gets there." Ethan almost smiled. James always wants that. He also says the video is moving fast. Ethan stopped beside a window overlooking the runway. "How fast?" Maya hesitated. "That depends on what you consider fast." "Maya. It passed 500,000 views in under an hour." Ethan looked out at the plane, still parked at the gate. North Star Flight 1876 had not moved. Ground crews stood near the nose. A fuel truck idled nearby. The aircraft looked powerful from a distance, but helpless up close, just like institutions often did when accountability finally arrived. "What are people saying?" Ethan asked. Maya's voice softened. "They are angry, but not just for you. People are posting their own stories, being questioned in first class, being followed in lounges, being asked to prove tickets that had already been scanned." Ethan closed his eyes. There it was again. Bigger than him. He had known it would be. He just wished it were not. "Save them," he said. "All of them?" "As many as we can. Names, dates, locations. Public posts only unless they reach out directly. You want to build a pattern. I want to stop pretending patterns are accidents." Maya went quiet for a second. Then she said, "Your mother called." That pierced through him in a way no corporate crisis could. Ethan's hand tightened around the phone. "What did she see?" "Enough." He turned away from the window. "Is she all right?" "She asked if you were safe. Then she asked if you were standing tall." For the first time that morning, Ethan's face almost broke. He saw Marilyn Brooks in his mind. 71 years old now, small but fierce, hands bent from years of work, voice still steady enough to hold a room quiet. She had raised him on discipline, faith, and the stubborn belief that humiliation was never proof of a person's worth. He swallowed. "What did you tell her?" "That you were." Ethan nodded once, though Maya could not see him. "Thank you." Downstairs, the Lincoln waited at the curb. Aaron, a tall man in his late 50s, stepped out and opened the rear door. "Mr. Brooks?" "Yes." Aaron glanced at him with quiet recognition, not from business magazines, but from the videos already spreading across his phone. "I saw what happened," Aaron said. Ethan paused. Aaron looked embarrassed for having spoken, but he kept going. My brother went through something like that at an airport in Dallas. Not first class, just a regular seat. They said his bag looked suspicious, searched him in front of everybody, found nothing, never apologized. Ethan stood with one hand on the open car door. I'm sorry. Aaron nodded, eyes fixed on the curb. He still gets nervous flying. That was the wound Ethan wanted North Star to see. Not public relations, not investor risk. Damage. The kind that followed people home. The apology matters, Ethan said. But what happens after matters more. Aaron looked at him then. Yes, sir. Ethan got into the car. As they pulled away from the terminal, Denise Harper stood near the sliding doors, watching the Lincoln leave. She had spent years in airline operations, telling herself difficult choices were just part of the job. Delays, angry passengers, crew pressure, chain of command. But this morning had stripped away the comfortable language. She had watched a man with a valid ticket be turned into a threat because that was easier than challenging the people above her. Her radio cracked. Denise, operations wants a written statement from you. She stared at the runway beyond the glass. For once, she did not answer right away. At North Star headquarters, the mood had already turned brittle. William Parker stood in the 32nd floor boardroom, jacket off, tie loosened, staring at the paused video on the wall screen. Ethan's face filled the frame. Calm, controlled, surrounded. Around the table, executives spoke over one another. We need a public statement. We need to protect the funding. We need to isolate Caldwell. We need to know who leaked the video. William turned. No, he said. The room stopped. We need to know why it happened. No one moved. His words were simple, but they frightened the room more than panic would have, because asking why meant looking backward. It meant old complaints, old settlements, old decisions made quietly because the passengers had no power. Then the conference room phone lit up. Reception. William pressed the button. Yes? Mr. Parker, the receptionist said, voice tense. Ethan Brooks has arrived. The room fell silent. William looked at the paused image on the screen, then at the executives around the table. Bring him up. He reached for his suit jacket and put it on slowly. Not for appearance, for judgment. Because everyone in that room understood something now. Ethan Brooks was no longer coming to ask for a seat at the table. He was coming to decide what kind of table North Star deserved to have. Ethan Brooks stepped into North Star headquarters without raising his voice, and somehow the lobby grew quieter. The building was all glass and steel, polished floors, soft lighting, a wall of framed aircraft photos showing North Star's history, its first routes, its first pilots, its first promise to connect people with dignity. That word caught Ethan's eye. Dignity. It was printed beneath an old black and white photo of smiling passengers boarding a propeller plane in the 1960s. He paused for half a second. Then he kept walking. At the front desk, a young receptionist named Allison Reed stood quickly. She had already been warned. Her eyes moved from Ethan's face to the phone, then back again. Mr. Brooks, she said. Mr. Parker is expecting you. Ethan nodded. Thank you. Her relief was visible. She was prepared for anger, maybe even shouting. She had not prepared for restraint. That restraint made the moment heavier. Aaron, the driver, remained near the entrance. He did not belong in the meeting, but he stayed long enough to watch Ethan disappear into the elevator. There was something healing in that sight. Not victory. Not yet. But a man walking into the building that had tried to shrink him, standing at full height. The elevator rose in silence. 32 floors. The lights above the door blinked one by one. Ethan saw his reflection in the brushed steel. His tie was still straight, his suit still pressed, but his eyes looked older than they had that morning. He thought of his mother asking if he was standing tall. He was. but standing tall could be exhausting. When the elevator opened, William Parker was waiting, 63 years old, silver hair, expensive navy suit, no smile. Beside him stood 2 board members, Susan Reeves and Martin Cole. Behind them, down the hallway, Ethan could see glass conference room walls and the blurred shapes of executives trying not to stare. "Mr. Brooks," William said. He extended his hand. Ethan looked at it, then shook it. Not warmly, not coldly, professionally. "Mr. Parker." William held the handshake a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to send regret through his palm. "I am sorry you had to come here under these circumstances." Ethan released his hand. Circumstances are usually created by choices. Susan Reeves glanced down, then back up. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed, with the controlled posture of someone who had spent years being the only woman in too many rooms. "That is fair," she said quietly. William turned toward the boardroom. "Please." The room was large, with a long walnut table and a panoramic view of the runways in the distance. On the wall screen, the video was paused at the worst possible frame. Ethan standing in the aisle, Claire in front of him, Nathan behind her, Richard watching from the side. Ethan stopped just inside the doorway. No one said anything. The people at the table looked at the screen, then at him, then away. That was how shame often entered a room. Not loudly, sideways. James Miller stood from a seat near the end of the table. He had arrived minutes earlier, his legal pad open, his expression tight. "Ethan." Ethan nodded. "James." Maya Robinson appeared on the screen by video call from Summit Ridge's New York office. Her face softened when she saw him. "You okay?" Ethan did not answer directly. "I'm here." That was enough. William motioned toward a chair at the head of the table. "Please sit." Ethan remained standing. "I would rather begin standing." The executives shifted. Nathan Caldwell was seated halfway down the table. He had changed since the airport. The arrogance was still there, but it had been covered by a thin layer of corporate caution. Claire Bennett sat 2 seats away from him, pale and silent, hands folded so tightly her knuckles looked white. Richard Hayes was not in the room. That was wise. William cleared his throat. "Before anything else, I want to say that North Star takes this matter seriously." Ethan looked at him. "I hope you understand how little that sentence means to someone after the damage is done." William stopped. James wrote something down. Nathan leaned back, his jaw set. "With respect," Nathan said, "the facts are still being gathered." Ethan turned toward him. The room cooled. Nathan continued, trying to sound measured. "There was confusion during boarding. A crew decision was made under time pressure. I regret that it escalated." Ethan studied him for one slow breath, then another. "Confusion did not remove me from my seat," Ethan said. "Pressure did not call security. Time did not treat Richard Hayes as entitled and me as suspicious. People did that." Claire closed her eyes. Nathan's face tightened. "I never instructed anyone to discriminate." "No," Ethan said. "People like you rarely use the word. You use words like accommodation, comfort, priority, security. You make bias sound operational. No one moved. Outside the glass, an assistant walking past slowed, then hurried away." Susan Reeves leaned forward. "Mr. Brooks, what do you want from this room today?" It was the first honest question. Ethan looked at her. "I want North Star to stop asking how to survive the headline and start asking who else you hurt before I had enough power to make you listen." Claire made a small sound. Almost a breath. Almost a sob. Ethan turned to her. "Miss Bennett." She looked up. Her eyes were wet now. He did not soften his voice, but he did not sharpen it either. Did Mr. Caldwell tell you to verify my credentials more thoroughly than other passengers? Claire's lips parted. Nathan spoke immediately. Claire, you do not have to answer that without counsel. Ethan did not look away from her. That is true, he said. You do not. Claire looked at Nathan, then at Ethan, then at the frozen image of herself on the screen. For the first time, she saw what the world saw. Not a policy, not a misunderstanding. A woman in uniform using borrowed authority to make a man smaller. Her voice shook. He told me a VIP needed that seat. Nathan's chair creaked. Claire kept going, quieter now. He said to find a reason if you pushed back. The room went still. Nathan's face hardened. That is not what I said. Claire turned toward him, tears now running freely. Yes, it is. The sentence was small, but it broke something open. William looked at Nathan, as if seeing him without the old protection around him. Maya's voice came from the screen. James, did you get that? James did not look up. Every word. Ethan finally sat. Slowly. Not because the fight was over, because the truth had entered the room, and now it needed to be made permanent. Claire Bennett wiped her face with both hands, but the tears had already changed the room. Nathan Caldwell stared at her like betrayal was something she had invented. Claire, he said, his voice low, warning her to stop without using the word. She shook her head. It was small at first, then stronger. No, she whispered. No, I'm not doing that. William Parker stood at the far end of the table. For years he had trusted Nathan to handle operational problems before they reached the executive floor. Delays, crew disputes, passenger complaints, quiet settlements, a signature here, a payment there. Problems that disappeared into folders. Now those folders seemed to be opening all at once. James Miller slid his legal pad closer. Ms. Bennett, he said, calm but firm, you should understand that you are not being asked to guess. Only to state what you directly heard and did. Claire nodded, breathing too fast. Nathan leaned forward. This is improper. She is an employee under stress. You cannot treat this as reliable. Ethan turned to him. You were comfortable relying on her judgment when it removed me from my seat. Nathan's mouth shut. The room held still. Maya Robinson's voice came from the screen. We have another video. Everyone looked up. On the monitor, the frozen image of Ethan in the aisle disappeared. A new clip appeared. Shaky phone footage from the gate, filmed through the aircraft doorway. Nathan was visible near the galley. Claire stood close to him. His voice was not perfectly clear, but it was clear enough. That passenger in 2A. Find a reason. Richard needs that seat. The clip ended. No one breathed for a moment. Then Susan Reeves closed her eyes. My God. Nathan's face turned hard. That is out of context. Ethan looked at the blank screen. No. It is very much in context. William sat down slowly, as if his knees had finally accepted what his mind resisted. Nathan, he said, voice flat. Did you instruct cabin crew to remove Ethan Brooks from his assigned seat? Nathan lifted his chin. I instructed them to resolve a seating conflict. There was no conflict, Ethan said, until you created one. Nathan looked at him then, and the mask slipped. Just a little. You think this company can survive by letting outside investors dictate our operation? There it was. Not an apology, not concern, fear. The raw kind. Ethan leaned back. No, Mr. Caldwell, I think this company cannot survive if its operation depends on humiliating customers who do not fit your idea of importance. Nathan gave a short laugh. You want to make this about race because it gives you leverage. Claire flinched. Susan's eyes snapped open. William said, Nathan. But Nathan was past caution now. He looked around the table, searching for allies, finding fewer than he expected. We have high-value customers. We make accommodations. That is business. Not every unpleasant customer interaction is discrimination. Ethan's voice stayed quiet. You are right. That surprised the room, Ethan continued. Not every unpleasant interaction is discrimination. That is why evidence matters. Patterns matter. Words matter. Who gets believed first matters. He turned to Claire. Miss Bennett, when I showed my boarding pass, did you believe it? Claire stared at the table. Her voice cracked. Yes. Nathan's chair scraped backward. Claire. She looked up at him, trembling now, but no longer shrinking. I believed it. I knew it was valid. The confession sat there, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan did not look victorious. That made it worse. Claire kept talking, words spilling now because truth had finally found air. I told myself it was just a seat, that you would get another flight, that Mr. Caldwell knew what he was doing, that I had a job to protect. She looked at Ethan. I am sorry. Ethan held her gaze. For a moment, the room waited for forgiveness like it was another business deliverable. But Ethan did not hand it over. I hear you, he said. Claire nodded, swallowing the pain of that answer. It was not rejection. It was not absolution. It was honest. And honesty was more than she deserved in that moment. James spoke next. North Star has received formal notice. Summit Ridge is suspending all remaining funding pending an independent investigation and structural remedies. William rubbed a hand over his face. What remedies? Ethan opened his briefcase and removed a thin folder. He placed it on the table. Independent review of all premium cabin removal complaints over the past 5 years. Preservation of employee messages related to passenger reassignment. Immediate suspension of Nathan Caldwell pending investigation. Protection for Claire Bennett and any employee who provides testimony. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training designed by an outside organization. Public reporting to the board. And a passenger dignity policy with real consequences. Nathan scoffed. Passenger dignity policy. That sounds like public relations. Ethan turned to him. No. Public relations is what companies write after harm. Dignity is what prevents harm before it happens. Susan picked up the folder. Her face changed as she read. This is not a demand for money. No, Ethan said. William looked at him carefully. Why? Ethan's eyes moved to the window, where aircraft lifted one by one into the pale afternoon sky. Because money is not what was taken first. The room went quiet again. Ethan continued, slower now. When a person is treated like they do not belong in a place they earned, something is taken from them. Not just comfort. Not just time. Their sense of safety in ordinary spaces. Their ability to walk into a room without preparing for insult. Claire began crying again, silently this time. Ethan looked back at the table. If this only ends with an apology to me, then North Star learns nothing, and the next person without my title gets moved, questioned, threatened, removed, then offered miles. William looked at Nathan. The decision was forming in his eyes. Nathan saw it. You are making a mistake, Nathan said. William's voice was cold now. No, Nathan. I think we made one this morning. He turned to Susan. Call emergency board council. Effective immediately, Nathan Caldwell is relieved of operational authority pending investigation. Nathan stood. You cannot do that. Susan did not blink. We just did. Nathan looked at Ethan with open hatred now, but Ethan only watched him with the same calm he had shown in seat 2A. Nathan had mistaken calm for weakness. That had been his first mistake. His second was thinking power only mattered when it looked like his. Nathan Caldwell did not leave the boardroom quietly. He pushed his chair back so hard it struck the glass wall behind him. The sound cracked through the room. Claire flinched. William did not. "You're handing this company to him," Nathan said, pointing at Ethan. "That is what this is." Ethan stayed seated. "No, Mr. Caldwell. I am asking this company to stop protecting people like you." Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in it now. "People like me built this airline." Susan Reeves closed the folder in front of her. "And people like you made some customers afraid to board it." That landed. For a second, Nathan had nothing. Then his phone began buzzing again. One call after another. Reporters, board allies, maybe Richard Hayes, maybe lawyers. The old network waking up, trying to protect itself. William looked toward the security manager, standing near the door. "Escort Mr. Caldwell to his office. He may collect personal belongings only. Company devices stay here." Nathan's eyes widened. "You cannot seize my property. Company phone, company laptop, company access cards," William said. "You know the policy better than anyone." Nathan's mouth tightened. For decades he had used policy like a weapon. Now it had turned in his hand. Two corporate security officers stepped forward. They were polite. Careful. The kind of careful used around powerful men who were no longer certain they were powerful. Nathan adjusted his jacket and looked at Ethan one last time. "You think this makes you righteous?" Ethan's voice was low. "No. It makes you accountable." The officers led Nathan out. The boardroom door closed behind him. For a moment, no one moved. The room had changed shape. Nathan was gone, but his presence remained in the empty chair, in Claire's wet eyes, in William's stiff shoulders, in the paused videos waiting on the screen. Then James Miller broke the silence. "We need written confirmation of his suspension, preservation of all records, and a third-party investigator retained by end of day." William nodded. "You will have it." Maya's voice came from the monitor. "And Claire Bennett needs protection from retaliation. Not just words. Written protection." Claire looked up, startled. She had expected blame, maybe termination. She had not expected the people she had harmed to insist that she not be crushed by the same system that used her. Ethan turned to her. "What you did was wrong," he said. She nodded, tears rising again. "I know. But if you tell the truth, the company cannot be allowed to punish you for exposing the chain of command." Claire's lips trembled. "Why would you protect me?" Ethan looked tired now, deeply tired. "Because accountability is not revenge." The words moved through the room slowly. Even William seemed to absorb them. Claire covered her mouth with one hand. She had spent the morning protecting the wrong people. Now the man she helped humiliate was drawing a line that included her humanity, even as he demanded consequences. That was harder to face than anger. A junior attorney entered with a laptop and whispered to Susan. Susan's expression changed. "We have another problem." William looked at her. "What now? The video from the gate is national. Major outlets have it. North Star's statement is being criticized already." "What statement?" William asked. The attorney swallowed. "Communication sent a holding statement 30 minutes ago, before legal review." James looked up sharply. "Read it." Susan looked at the laptop. North Star Airlines is aware of an incident involving a passenger who was reaccommodated following standard safety procedures. We take customer concerns seriously and are reviewing the matter. The room went cold. Ethan leaned back. Reaccommodated. William closed his eyes. James wrote the word down. Maya spoke first. That statement just made everything worse. Ethan's face stayed calm, but his eyes hardened. Because it repeats the harm. It turns removal into comfort. It turns discrimination into procedure. It turns me into a concern. William turned to the attorney. "Retract it. Now." Susan raised a hand. "Not retract. Replace. With the truth." William looked at Ethan. "What would you have us say?" Ethan did not answer immediately. Outside the windows, a North Star jet lifted into the sky. It climbed clean and bright, leaving the ground behind. For most passengers, that was all a flight was supposed to be. A way forward. A bridge between where they were and where they needed to go. No one should have to earn dignity at the gate. Ethan spoke slowly. Say a passenger with a valid first-class ticket was wrongly removed from his assigned seat. Say North Star is preserving records and appointing an independent investigator. Say Nathan Caldwell has been suspended from operational duties pending review. Say employees who come forward will be protected. And say the company is examining whether this incident reflects a broader pattern. William stared at him. That will hurt us. Ethan nodded. The truth often does at first. Susan stood. It will hurt less than another lie. William looked around the room. For years he had measured risk in stock price, press cycles, route disruptions, fuel costs. But now risk had a human face. Ethan's, Claire's, the unseen passengers whose stories were flooding the internet. Send it, William said. The junior attorney hurried out. Claire sat back, shaking. Ethan noticed. You should call someone, he said. She blinked. What? Someone who knows you beyond this room? Claire looked down at her hands. My daughter is in college. She'll see it. Ethan's expression softened for the first time. Then tell her the truth before the internet does. Claire broke then, not loudly, just a quiet collapse inward. Shame had found its way past fear. I don't know how to explain that I became this person. Ethan's voice slowed. You start by not pretending you didn't. The simplicity of it seemed to steady her. William's phone buzzed. He read the screen. The board is convening in 1 hour. Susan nodded. Good. James closed his folder. Then Summit Ridge will attend as an interested party. William looked at Ethan. Will you still meet with us? Ethan stood. Yes. Hope flickered across William's face. Ethan saw it and ended it before it grew too comfortable. But not to finalize funding. The room stilled again. Then why? William asked. Ethan picked up his briefcase. To decide whether North Star is worth saving. No one followed him as he walked to the window. Below, far across the runway, Flight 1876 finally pushed back from the gate. Seat 2A was empty. Richard Hayes had been moved. Ethan had refused to return. The empty seat looked small from that distance, but everyone in the room understood what it represented now. Not luxury, not status. A test, and North Star had failed it in front of the world. By late afternoon, the boardroom no longer looked like a place built for control. Coffee cups sat untouched. Legal pads were covered in rushed notes. Phones buzzed without pause. Outside the glass walls, assistants moved quickly and spoke softly, the way people do when a company's future has started to bend. Ethan Brooks sat at the table now, not at the head. Not yet. He sat halfway down, where he could see everyone clearly. William Parker stood near the screen, reading the updated public statement one final time. His voice was rough from hours of calls. North Star Airlines confirms that a passenger with a valid first-class ticket was wrongly removed from his assigned seat on Flight 1876. We have suspended senior operational authority pending an independent review. We are preserving all records and protecting employees who come forward. We are also examining whether this incident reflects a broader pattern within our company. He stopped. No one corrected a word. Susan Reeves looked at Ethan. It is the most honest statement this company has issued in years. William lowered the paper. That is not a compliment. No, Susan said. It is a diagnosis. Across the room, Claire Bennett sat with a cup of water in both hands. She had called her daughter. The call had lasted less than 5 minutes. It had not fixed anything. But when she hung up, her face looked different. Still ashamed. but no longer hiding. "My daughter asked me one thing," Claire said quietly. The room turned toward her. "She asked if I told the truth before I was forced to." Her voice broke on the last word. No one rushed to comfort her. That would have been too easy. But Ethan looked at her with a kind of sadness that did not excuse her and did not discard her. "That is where repair begins," he said. "Not with being forgiven, with becoming honest enough to deserve it someday." Claire nodded. Tears fell again, but this time she did not wipe them away immediately. The board meeting began at 5 o'clock. Some joined in person. Some appeared on screens from Dallas, Atlanta, Phoenix, and New York. Their faces carried the same expression at first: damage control, containment, survival. Then James Miller played the videos: the cabin, the gate, Nathan's instruction, Claire's confession, Paul and Margaret Ellis speaking up when silence would have been easier. The room changed frame by frame. A director from Texas leaned back and covered his mouth. A former airline executive from Georgia took off his glasses and stared at the table. A younger board member, Danielle Brooks, kept her eyes on Ethan the entire time, not with pity, but with recognition. When the final clip ended, William spoke. "We need to decide if this company wants to defend what happened or change what allowed it." No one answered quickly. Then Danielle spoke. "My father stopped flying for 10 years after being removed from a business class seat he paid for. He never sued, never made a scene. He just stopped going where he no longer felt safe." Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes shone. That was not a customer service issue. That was a wound. The silence after that was different. It had weight. Susan moved the first formal motion. Nathan Caldwell would remain suspended pending termination review. An independent civil rights firm would investigate premium cabin removals, passenger complaints, and internal reassignment practices from the last 5 years. A board ethics committee would be created. Employee protection would be written into policy. Passenger dignity standards would become enforceable. Not slogans, not posters, rules, consequences, training, records, review. William looked at Ethan when the vote passed. "It is a beginning." Ethan nodded. "Only if you treat it like one." Later, as the sun dropped behind the runways, Ethan finally stepped out of the boardroom. The hallway was quiet now. The whole building seemed to be holding its breath. His phone buzzed, a message from his mother. Standing tall is not about never being hurt. It is about not letting hurt teach you to bow. Ethan read it twice. For the first time that day, his shoulders lowered, not in defeat, in release. He walked to the window at the end of the hall. Below, aircraft lights moved across the darkening tarmac. People were still traveling, still hoping to arrive somewhere safely, still trusting strangers in uniforms, badges, suits, and boardrooms to see them as human beings first. That was the real responsibility. Not the seat, not the status. The seeing. Behind him, William approached slowly. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "Summit Ridge still has every right to walk away." Ethan did not turn at first. "Yes. And will you?" Ethan watched a plane rise into the orange sky. "I do not know yet." William accepted that. Maybe for the first time all day, he did not try to manage the answer. Ethan finally turned. "But if we stay, it will not be because North Star apologized to me. It will be because North Star proves it can become safer for people who do not have my money, my lawyers, or my title." William nodded. "That is fair. No," Ethan said gently. "It is necessary." The next morning, North Star's new statement ran across every major network. Not everyone believed it. They were right to be cautious. Trust does not return because a company says the correct words under pressure. But something had shifted. Passengers began sharing stories, Employees began sending documents. People who had stayed silent for years found the courage to say, "This happened to me too." And Ethan Brooks, the man they tried to remove from seat 2A, became more than a headline. He became a reminder. Dignity is not a luxury upgrade. Respect is not reserved for people who look powerful. And justice doesn't begin when someone important is harmed. It begins when ordinary people decide that harm should never have been ordinary at all. If this story moved you, support it with a like so more people can hear its message. Subscribe for more stories about courage, accountability, and human dignity. And in the comments, write these 3 words. Never stay silent.